All right, so next up, we are going to hear from a bit more about the 1C for Cuba campaign. So we're super happy to have with us Tamara Hansen from Vancouver Communities in Solidarity with Cuba. Yeah, speaking to us all the way from across the world. So yes, Tamara, you have the floor. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Regan. Thank you so much to Rock Around the Blockade for organizing today's webinar, and I'm excited to be joining on behalf of the 1 Cent for Cuba campaign. My name again is Tamara Hansen. I'm the coordinator of Vancouver Communities in Solidarity with Cuba. I'm also the author of 5 Decades of the Cuban Revolution, The Challenges of an Unwavering Leadership, an organizer with the U.S.-Cuba Normalization Conference Coalition, the 1 Cent for Cuba campaign, and an editorial board member of the Fire This Time newspaper in Canada. I'm also a high school teacher and a union member. So really excited to be here with all of you today. As it was kind of outlined by our previous speaker, we know that for over 60 years, the Cuban people have been living under a criminal and unjust US blockade. And we know that during the first Trump administration, over 260 additional measures were added to the US blockade on Cuba, including adding Cuba to the so-called State Sponsors of Terrorism, or SSOT list. And now with the second Trump administration in power, we have the anti-Cuban zealot Marco Rubio as Trump's Secretary of State, which we know has important consequences for Cuba, but also important consequences for our work. And so we've seen increasing rhetoric against Cuba, especially against Cuba's amazing and hardworking internationalist medical brigades and doctor training programs. And yesterday, we saw the announcement from the US State Department that Cuba is being certified as not fully cooperating country with US counterterrorism efforts. And each of these steps against Cuba makes the blockade against Cuba just a little bit tighter. And each of these, Cuba's inclusion on each of these lists makes it more difficult for Cuba to trade internationally, makes it more difficult for Cuba to work and coordinate with other countries internationally. I don't have a lot of time today, but I really want to encourage folks to read the U.S. State Department's hypocritical and shameful press release from yesterday, and please respond by writing statements in favor of Cuba, by posting in favor of Cuba on social media. Expose these hypocrites for what they are trying to do against the Cuban people and its revolutionary government. And these attacks remind us of the need for unity and the need for continuing to work together on important campaigns such as the 1 Cent for Cuba campaign. I'm just going to put in the chat right now the link to the press release and from the US State Department, and again encourage folks to use that to make your voices heard. So at the same time that Cuba needs us, I think that we always have to mention that we need Cuba. And the reason for this is that Cuba, as was outlined so well by the speaker before me, is a country where working and oppressed people have power and have the ability to determine their own future. Whether it is popular debates on Cuba's family codes or retirement age, the Cuban government is consistently appealing to the Cuban people for their feedback and participation in Cuba's political, economic, and social future. In Cuba's socialist system, humanity comes first. And you see that as soon as you arrive in Cuba at the Jose Marti airport, where there's the giant slogan, Patria es humanidad, humanity is our homeland. So my job here today is to outline a little bit about the 1 Cent for Cuba campaign and what we're all about, and to appeal to folks to get involved. The idea of the 1 Cent for Cuba campaign is to mobilize large numbers of bank transactions, small bank transactions, 1 cent, 1 pence, using the reference words or destinations that are likely to trigger bank sanctions and mechanisms against Cuba. So each small transaction and subsequent complaint process can create a burden and costly administrative work for the banking system at minimal cost to the customer. And this basically makes the blockade on Cuba expensive for banks to enforce, and makes our campaign more and more vibrant. And banks are enforcing the US blockade on Cuba despite national and international laws that prevent this. And we have seen this in Europe, in Canada. This is having an impact on people's ability to collect and fundraise for Cuba. And so this is something that the 1 Cent for Cuba campaign seeks to expose because it's against our national and international laws, as our countries are apparently against the US blockade on Cuba as they vote every year at the United Nations. And yet the banks are still enforcing this illegal blockade. So an example of this is that HSBC inhibited the account of Cubanos en el UK from a community association that was raising funds to send medical equipment to Cuba with Danny Acosta, who's here today and helping with tech. After this was denounced publicly and protests were called, HSBC unblocked the account, but Cuba remains on the bank's sanctions list. And so this so far has been a campaign of protest and complaints by individuals, but as a campaign, we're now also working to engage lawyers and work to make this more of a legal campaign as well as a political campaign. So I'm just going to bring up, I've got a couple of things just to show on slides here. So these, again, beautiful animations made for our recent international days of campaigning for 1 Cent for Cuba. But basically, these are things that, again, you could share on your social media in order to help us promote the campaign. And our main slogan, tell the banks to unblock Cuba. And so basically, to participate in the campaign, we have a detailed list on our website where you can make a transfer now. It explains the step-by-step process of how to make a bank transfer referencing Cuba. And what we're asking people to do is to put Cuba in the reference of the bank transfer and check in sometimes for up to 60 to 90 days whether or not the bank transfer actually went through. Sometimes it will appear that it has gone through and then be sent back to you. And when it is sent back, complain to the bank. And once you complain to the bank, also fill out our online form, which is where we're collecting data to inform our lawyers about all of the blocks that are happening throughout Europe, especially in order to build our campaign that these banks are illegally participating in the US blockade on Cuba, and work to escalate the complaint to your national financial regulator. Again, many countries from Ireland to Canada to others have laws for independent financial regulation, and this means that they should not be enforcing the US blockade on Cuba, which is not a local national law in these countries, and yet they are. Again, we need you, once you have filled in a transfer and made a transfer, to click on our Google form and let us know about your experience, because we are collecting that data for our lawyers and for a potential legal campaign. And that's very important. So I also, again, wanted to remind folks, please, to make sure to respond to this press statement from the US State Department yesterday, the certification of Cuba as not fully cooperating country. So our transfers from Canada have not been fully blocked at this time, but Vancouver Communities in solidarity with Cuba is continuing to participate in the 1 Cent for Cuba campaign. And this is because we feel that this is a really important international coalition that is fighting the blockade on Cuba. We're always looking for new ideas and folks to get involved in 1 Cent for Cuba. So please reach out to us to join our coalition and meetings. And then I just wanted to also highlight some of the work of Vancouver Communities in solidarity with Cuba. We're organizing monthly car caravans against the US blockade on Cuba on the last Sunday of every month. This is in coordination with Puentes de Amor, as well as other campaigns across Canada. There are monthly actions right now happening in Manitoba, in Ontario, in Quebec, and each of these communities is either rallying or having a car caravan on the final weekend of the month in solidarity with Cuba against the blockade. There's also organizations throughout the Caribbean and Latin America who are also organizing similar actions on the last weekend of the month. We also recently welcomed a Cuban filmmaker, Patricia Ramos, to Vancouver to show her new film, Una Noche con los Rolling Stones, A Night with the Rolling Stones. And next week, we're going to be celebrating 21 years of the work of Vancouver Communities in solidarity with Cuba, with a visit from our Cuban Consul General, Yanier Castellanos Horta, who's going to be coming to Vancouver and joining us for this celebration. So that's just a little bit about our local work as well. I just want to conclude by saying that I think that working and oppressed people are going to be the ones who play a pivotal role in ending the US blockade on Cuba, in taking Cuba off the state sponsors of terrorism list, and that the 1 Cent for Cuba campaign is a creative and united campaign working towards this, along with a lot of other campaigns internationally. And I hope that you will all get involved and join us as we work together to end the cruel and unjust US blockade on Cuba. So let us continue forward with unity, unity, unity. Abajo el bloqueo, lift the blockade on Cuba. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tamara. It's incredibly important work, what you all are doing, what everyone's doing with the 1C for Cuba campaign. And I think, yeah, the point that you ended on is the most crucial. It's going to be working people of the world. It is going to be international solidarity. That is what brings about the end to the blockade. And it's not just a blockade that's being imposed by the US, it's a blockade that's being upheld by our ruling classes in Canada, in Britain, in Europe. And yeah, it's up to us, it's up to the people that are within those countries to oppose the ruling class, oppose the state, and oppose institutions that are upholding this genocide against Cuba. So thank you so much again for your speech. We have a short video contribution as well of our comrades Pat Howard from the Cuba Support Group Ireland about, again, the 1 Cent for Cuba campaign. So we'll go ahead and show that video now.
Hello, good evening to everyone taking part in this evening's webinar. It's Pat O'Hyver here from Cuba Support Group Ireland and 1 Cent for Cuba in Dublin. And I'm going to just take you through briefly of how the US government imposes its sanctions laws here in the Irish state. Here outside the offices of Citibank on Dublin's North Wall. It's from these offices behind me that US sanctions law is implemented across the Irish state and across the EU itself. For its own political and ideological reasons, the US government, supposedly in defense of the free market, implements a blockade on the Cuban state. This blockade has far-reaching consequences and reaches far into the workings of EU trade and business with Cuba. The Dublin government first started courting US corporations in the 1950s. Citibank opened up its office here in 1965, 60 years ago now, almost as long as the US blockade on Cuba itself. Since that time, with the opening of the Irish Financial Services Centre and the introduction of special low corporation taxes for foreign corporations, the influence of US businesses and over Irish fiscal policy has grown immensely. Domestic Irish banks use a third party, i.e. Citibank, to filter transactions, no matter whether they're national transactions or international transactions. Each transaction is filtered for keywords such as Cuba, North Korea, Iran, any state that's subject to US sanctions law. Transactions that are deemed to be suspicious are paused and customers are contacted and asked to give a satisfactory explanation as to what they are for.
1 cent for Cuba activists have been holding a stall outside the GPO in central Dublin each month for over 2 years now. Our purpose is to highlight the complicity of the Irish banking system in the extraterritorial implementation of US sanctions law in Ireland and in other countries on this side of the Atlantic. It's amazing the amount of people think that Barack Obama dismantled the US blockade. We get approached by a mix of Irish, new Irish, immigrants, foreign students and tourists, many of whom have had some connection to or have travelled to Cuba. The first part of building a campaign like this is the dissemination of truthful information. For as Rosa Luxemburg once said, the most powerful thing one can do is to always proclaim loudly what is happening. We've been approached by people who work within the financial system who have told us that everything we say in our placards and leaflets is 100% the case. Irish people have a long history of struggle for national liberation, sovereignty, and against the exploitative interests of foreign capital. And that history is reflected in our widespread solidarity with the Palestinian people in their struggle for survival against the current Israeli occupation and genocide. Within our collective memory lie the scars of foreign plantation, of ethnic cleansing, of artificially created famines, of forced immigration, religious discrimination, imprisonment, forced exile, executions and subjugation. And out of that collective memory comes an almost instinctive recognition of and solidarity with the struggles of other people suffering from similar afflictions. There has been a strong sense of solidarity with the Cuban Revolution for decades within Irish leftist and Republican circles, especially from within the occupied 6 counties. This organic solidarity with Cuba permeates through Irish society, so it's quite uncommon to receive any negative feedback about our stall. The 1 cent for Cuba campaign is unique in that it offers ordinary people a way to find out for themselves if their own bank overrides Irish and EU legislation to give priority to the laws of the US government in their dealings here in Ireland. The fact that certain Irish banks use Citibank as a third party who, using AI-powered technology, filter through each single banking transaction in real time, whether that be a local or international payment, done through bank transfers or through Visa, PayPal or other payments, isn't appreciated by the Irish public. This intrusion of privacy into people's personal financial affairs and the nefarious purposes for which it is done doesn't rank well with people at all.